Okay, guys, I had to start this whole word over. Satan is busy. But this is day 3 of the 40 days of surrender. And I'll be on here for the next 40 days. It started on Monday, Memorial Day. This is the 3rd day of the 40 days of surrender. And it's just me jumping on, giving you guys whatever God puts on my heart for that day to give, whether it is a vision, a dream, whatever he speaks to my heart, whatever he wants me to release to you guys on each day is what I'll be on here doing. Okay, so this is day 3. If you want to go back and watch the previous words, they are in a folder called 40 Days of Surrender. Okay, so this is day 3. So the title of this word is she or he, if you're a man, couldn't stand in your place. She or he, if you're a man, couldn't stand in your place. And this is pertaining to marriage restoration and a counterfeit that is involved or was involved, okay, with either your husband or your wife, depending on if you're male or female, right? So this is a marriage restoration word that involves a counterfeit. This word is not for everybody. Even if you are waiting on marriage restoration, everybody's marriage restoration story is different. So just like any other prophetic word, take the person giving the word back to God. Take the word back to God. Let him tell you if it's for you or not. Not every marriage restoration word is relevant to your situation. And if you just hang on to every word that comes out about marriage restoration and a counterfeit and so forth, you'll be confused and disappointed. So just take every prophetic word back to God, regardless of what's happening or what's going on in your life. But those who this word is for, also take this word back to God and just let him elaborate on it further for you. But I had this dream either yesterday morning or Monday morning. I can't remember and I can't look at the date because it is in my phone. But this word made me giggle once I understood what it actually meant. But again, it's called she or he couldn't stand in your place. Okay. And the Lord is saying the counterfeit could never have stood in your place. Like it was never going to work. It was always going to be fulfilled exactly how the Lord told you it would be fulfilled. He's always going to fulfill his promises. If he has ordained a marriage, who he brings together, nobody can separate. Nobody can separate. People may come in, they may try to do the most. They cannot separate what God has ordained it to be. Okay. And for the scriptures for this dream, I'm going to go back to some verses that pertain to Sarah and Hagar. And many of you should already know the story of what happened with Sarah and Hagar. The Lord promised her the birth of Isaac, right? Sarah felt like she was too old to birth a baby, so Hagar got involved. You can look at her as a counterfeit, and she gave birth to Abraham's child, but that wasn't the promise. That wasn't who God ordained to be the promised child, right? So they birthed that thing out of the flesh, and it didn't work out quite right. Okay, who God had said would be the promised child is exactly who that promised child was going to be, and it was going to come from Sarah exactly the way the Lord said it would. Nothing could replace God's promise, right? Nothing can replace God's promise. It may come first, it may come before the promise, but it can never replace. First does not mean that it replaces what God said. At the perfect time, at God's divine time, his promise will be fulfilled. Doesn't matter who came first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. Okay, God's promise is his promise, and it will always stand. Okay, so in this dream, I was in my ex-husband's house. And the Lord uses my ex-husband in a lot of my dreams to get words to those that it's for, that's standing for marriage. So I always know in a dream when God uses my ex-husband, he's either referring to him as a prodigal and letting me know what's going on with prodigal sons in this hour, or prodigal women, or it's like a marriage restoration. So I always know God knows who to use in my dreams. Okay. So I was in my ex-husband's house, and it was myself, another young lady that my ex-husband was connected to, and I don't remember her face, so I don't know if this was his ex-wife that he divorced after me, or somebody that I don't know who she was. I just know that they were romantically connected, and that this person thought that she was going to be my ex-husband's wife, right? So I know that it was somebody that he was connected with romantically, and they were in a serious relationship. So it was myself, this young lady, my ex-husband, and then some men in the house that my ex-husband knew. I couldn't see their faces. I just knew the men that were there. He was very close to them. Okay. So in the dream, we're all standing in we're all in the living room, right? And this lady comes through the front door, and she has this baby, and she gives me the baby, and I'm standing up holding the baby, and I'm like getting the baby comfortable, taking care of the baby, but the whole time I'm standing up, right, while I'm doing this. So the lady takes the baby from me, and she gives it to the counterfeit, so to speak, the woman that my ex-husband was connected to romantically. She gives her the baby. This young lady sits on the couch, and she begins to hold the baby. So the lady begins to tell the counterfeit who sat on the couch, she's like, I give you the baby and you're sitting. She's like, you have to sit to hold the baby. Gave her the baby. She stood and took care of the baby. Like, she's better because she stood. She was chosen for this. And she's just going on and on and on. And she's like, you couldn't even stand. You had to just sit. You had to sit and hold the baby. And this lady was going in. So in the midst of her, like, pretty much complimenting me on standing or holding this baby while standing, I look at my ex-husband and I was just like, you know, like a cute little pose, because this lady is like vouching for me, right? And that was pretty much the end of the dream. Okay, what the Lord gave me from this word or from this dream, again, the Lord is saying she couldn't stand in your place. She couldn't stand in your place. This isn't a position that God ordained this counterfeit for, whether the counterfeit is a male or female. This isn't a position that God ordained them to be in, so they could never stand and take your place and carry out this marriage covenant. It was never theirs to begin with. So they could never stand. It would have never worked, guys. It would have never worked with the counterfeit. Just like it did not work with Hagar. Okay, she may have birthed Ishmael, and Ishmael came first, but even though Ishmael came before Isaac, Isaac was still the promise. Okay, and for the standing and sitting part, me standing and the young woman sitting, or the counterfeit sitting, these are the verses the Lord brought me to. I'm going to first read from Genesis 21, verses 1 through 6, the NIV version. It says, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, and he said, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore. When the son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, and as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. The Lord is saying, in this moment, when Sarah gave birth to Isaac, she was joyful. She was happy. He made her laugh. She laughed initially when she thought it wasn't going to happen, but when it happened, she was excited. She laughed. She said, everybody else will laugh with me. Her giving birth to Isaac was a blessing. It was a happy moment for her. Okay, and picture this in your head. This is how God spoke into my heart. He said, when you're excited and joyous over something like this, you're standing up and you're excited and you're joyous. So he's saying, when he tells a person, this is what's going to happen, and I've ordained you to do this thing, I'm going to birth this thing through you, you will always carry that thing standing. You will always stand. It will always end in laughter for you and joy, because that is something God promised to you. When a counterfeit, however, tries to carry this covenant that God promised to you, when the counterfeit tries to carry what God had promised to you, they end up sitting. Okay, and you're going to see the difference here. I'm going to read from Genesis 21 verses 15 through 16. It says, actually, no, sorry, guys. Hold on. Yeah, I'm right. Genesis 21 verses 15 through 16. And this is Hagar. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under the bushes. This is Ishmael, okay? She in the middle of nowhere, like, feels like her and her son are about to die, okay? Remember Hagar. She gave birth to Ishmael, who was basically the counterfeit promise, okay? It was a promise birth through the flesh, okay? Not the promise of God. So catch this. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And she sat there and she began to sob. Catch this spiritually. The Lord is saying when he promises to birth something through you, when he promises a covenant to you, you are the only one that can stand and carry it, and it will end well for you. But when a counterfeit tries to carry a promise made out of the flesh, they end up sitting and sobbing, just like Hagar. She sat under this tree and began to sob. She sat under this tree and she began to sob. So she couldn't stand. What she had birthed out caused uncomfortable consequences. Thank you, Holy Spirit. What she had birthed out, this counterfeit promise, because it wasn't ordained by God. They birthed this thing through the flesh. This wasn't manifestation of God. This was manifestation of flesh. The consequences of what she had birthed caused her to sit and prepare to die, right? She was crying. She was preparing to die. She was preparing for her and her son to die, for her and that fleshly promise to die. She sat, just like the girl in this dream. The lady gave her the baby and she sat down. But she gave me the baby and I stood. When God promises you something, and I hope that you guys are catching this spiritually because God speaks to me in parables. When God promises you something, you are the only one that can stand on that promise. You are the only one that can stand in its place. You are the only one that will be left standing and laughing, not sitting and sobbing. Sitting and sobbing happens when counterfeits try to carry out something God didn't give them to carry. So, which is why in the dream, the lady is saying, she's standing and taking care of this baby. You had to sit and take care of this baby. She's better at carrying this than you. This is her. Like the lady was just going on and on. And that is what God was saying. That counterfeits end up sitting when they try to carry something, carry a covenant, carry a promise that God didn't ordain for them to carry, that God didn't ordain for them to be in. But the person that God ordained to carry that thing, the ending result is them standing with their head held high, laughing and joyous because God followed through with that promise. He fulfilled that promise. So the baby in the dream represented fulfillment of a marriage promise that God had ordained. Okay. The Lord also led me to Galatians 4 verse 23. And I'm going to read from the NLT version. It says, the son of the slave wife, that's Hagar, was born in a human attempt to bring about the fulfillment of God's promise. But the son of the freeborn wife, Sarah, was born as God's own fulfillment of his promise. Catch that. I'm also going to read it from the NIV version. Hold on, guys. I'm going to read it from the Amplified. But the child of the slave woman, again Hagar, was born according to the flesh and had an ordinary birth, while the son of the free woman was born in fulfillment of the promise. One was born out of the flesh. One was born because it was manifestation of God. It was God ordained. So when God ordains something for somebody, the only person that's going to be able to stand and carry that promise is the one God ordained. The other one's going to end up sitting and sobbing because it's never going to work out. One thing about flowers, guys, you can water fake flowers. Them things ain't going to never grow. But if you water the real thing, those things are going to grow and grow and grow and grow. But if you pour water on a fake flower, that flower's still going to stay the same size, okay? Translation. Counterfeits can never fulfill what God has ordained. The only person that can fulfill that and stand in that place and do what's necessary in that marriage, that covenant, is the one God had ordained. The counterfeit, it'll never grow into anything because it's a fake flower. It's a fake flower where it's planted. They only become real flowers when they're planted on good soil, the soil that God has for them. But that person who God ordained, that's the real flower in that covenant, in that marriage, in that thing. So God, when God pours his water that never runs dry on that real thing, it grows. But a fake flower, you can pour all the water you want on a fake flower, it's never going to grow. Whatever counterfeits try to get themselves into, and a lot of them don't know. So I'm not calling the counterfeit a bad person, and I did a word on that, so I'm not going to get into it. But water on a fake flower, there's going to be no growth. So they get themselves into something that leads to sitting and sobbing because that's not a position ordained for them. Any of us that put ourselves in counterfeit situations where we're a counterfeit to something, whether we take on a job that God didn't ordain, that means we're a counterfeit at that job. We don't belong there. We'll never grow there. If I get myself in a marriage that God didn't ordain, and God has a wife for that person and a husband for me, it's never going to grow. I'm a fake flower in that marriage. I'm never going to grow in it. It's never going to grow into anything. You can pour all the water you want on a fake flower. It will produce no growth. But when you pour it on what's real, you can reap a harvest. It will grow into something so beautiful. So that's the word, guys. I hope it made sense. No, I don't. It made sense for who it's for, but that's the word, guys. God is saying she couldn't stand in your place. She couldn't stand in your place. And if you're a guy, the Lord is just saying he couldn't stand in your place. So that's all, guys. I love you. I hope you have a great Wednesday, and we'll talk soon. Bye.